As we jump back into chapter 32, picking up in verse 24, keep in mind, Jacob's waiting for this group of 400 men and Esau, his brother, to come, not knowing what's going to happen. And now we get, as Gaye had talked about at the beginning, the second bookend experience. And Jacob's whole life is going to change with what happens here, with this experience. Starting in verse 24, it says, "And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." So after the name change, verse 29 says, "And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved."
Okay, this is a really powerful, interesting experience with, frankly, lots of questions that we don't have lots of answers to, and the text doesn't answer for us. So with some of the questions are, so who is Jacob wrestling with? Is this person divine or mortal? Why are they wrestling? What's the blessing that Jacob is seeking? And why is Jacob's name being changed? And as the text is silent on most of these questions, but there are some clues that can help us to have some insights, I think. Jacob himself gives us a couple of clues. Number one, he sees whatever is happening here as a period of personal redemption. I think that's really important. Years later, in the end of Genesis, when Jacob is blessing his children, he refers to, in Genesis 48:16, the angel which redeemed me from evil. And many scholars see this as a reference back to what's happening here at Peniel. So there's some kind of redemption that is going on. And I think the second clue that Jacob gives us is what he calls this place on the Jabbok River, Peniel, which again in Hebrew means the face of God. And so there's this experience here, this kind of implication here, whereas in Bethel he was invited into the presence of God. Here at Peniel he has fulfilled that experience, and now he's in some way connected personally, face to face with God. So what is it that he's wrestling for? Well, I think the immediate context would suggest that he's wanting a blessing that his meeting with Esau will be peaceful when he arrives. But I think in the larger context, what's happening here is because of this spiritual journey that Jacob has been on, this metamorphosis that he is going through, and because of his experiences in Haran, where he has learned to trust God, now, unlike Bethel in some sense, he may be saying and wrestling for, the blessing I want is the blessing that God promised me in Bethel. I want now to declare my total allegiance to God and enter into this covenant with him. And so one of the ways I think that happens is after the Jabbok River experience, he comes down through the valley, he crosses over the Jordan, and he goes to Shechem. In Genesis 33, the verses I love are verses 18 through 20. "And Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, or Haran, and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And in verse 20, and he erected there an altar. This is now, he is following in his grandfather's footsteps. Many of the places that Jacob has visited on this journey are the same places that Abraham had experienced, and he'd stopped and he had erected his altars in those cities. And now Jacob is following in his footsteps. And he erected there an altar, and he called it El Elohe Yisrael, which in Hebrew means God is the God of Israel. El is the God of Israel. So what he's saying, at this point, the only Israel in the story is Jacob. His name has been changed to Israel. And as President Nelson has indicated, at least one of the meanings of Israel is let God prevail. Jacob is now in a place where he is letting God prevail in his life. And by erecting this altar, he is making a statement to anybody who would come, to himself and to anybody who passes, that Jacob has now chosen of all of the gods. He, like his father and grandfather, has chosen Jehovah to be his God. Now the covenant and the spiritual metamorphosis of this journey has become complete. He then returns to Bethel, and God says to him, and again notice the covenant language. We're now in chapter 35, reading verses 9 down through 12. And God appeared unto Jacob again at Bethel, and when he came out of Padan Haran, and blessed him. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, not one who deceives, but Israel, let God prevail, shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give this land. And so we have the full circle of this journey of Jacob choosing the God of his fathers to be his God.
These are such beautiful concepts. The trick for us is to figure out how to make Jacob's story become our story. Because as you were talking through this transition, Gaye, the thought crossed my mind, isn't that fascinating that God didn't place that name on him back at Bethel originally?
Right.
He gave him 20 years to choose. So he made all kinds of promises, but he gave him 20 years to choose. Will you still be faithful even when things are rough, even when things are hard?
And in the ancient world, a change of name represents a change in status. And so his status before God has now changed.
Isn't that interesting? God put his name upon him. He's literally given him a new name, a new identity, a new status to move forward, which, if you use that ladder analogy, he's at a different level. He's grown, he's developed over time.